At the end of the previous chapter, I recorded a segment from my podcast in which I recorded my own voice onto this Vox One track, and the person I was interviewing was recorded onto the guest track. Now, it was a fairly loose and conversational interview, but there were definitely a couple of times both of us stumbled over our words and then corrected ourselves. So what I'd like to do now is go through and edit the interview in real time. Now, I'm not going to worry about removing things like ums or uhs or pauses where we were searching for the words we wanted to use, but I do want to get rid of some of the more obvious stumbles just to sort of help the flow of the interview keep moving forward. If you have access to the exercise files, you can open the version of this file found in the 0401 folder if you want to try editing this on your own too. But let's start at the beginning. I'll click the Go to the Beginning button. You can also press Return on your keyboard. And all I'm going to do here is play this from the start and fix the things I think need to be fixed as I'm listening back through the whole thing. So I'll click play. I can also use the space bar on my keyboard. And off we go. Okay, so right from the start there, we hear my and off we go. And I can also hear both of us taking breaths right before this started. So I want to cut those out. Now, it's important for me to remember that I'm working with two separate tracks here that need to remain synced together, because this is a conversation, and if I cut or move some content on one track without cutting or moving content on the other one, they'll fall out of sync, and I'll end up with the two tracks talking over each other. So when I'm making these sorts of edits where I'm cutting out and moving content, I need to make sure to do so on both tracks. So in this case, you can see this Vox 1 region is selected. I'm going to hold the Shift key on my keyboard to select the region below it. Now both are selected, and I'm going to listen back again to figure out where I want to make this cut. I'm also going to adjust the zoom view here a little bit so I can see a slightly longer version of the timeline. I'm also going to hide the library so I can see more of the waveform. And off we go. All right, so basically right after we hear those two breaths. So with both of these regions selected, I'm going to come up to the Edit menu, and the command I'm going to be using a lot here is Split Regions at Playhead. The keyboard command for this is Command T. It's one of the ones I suggest you learn. So with my playhead right there, I'm going to hit Command T. You can see that splits both of those regions. And now I'm going to select these first two regions, again by holding Shift, and I'll press Delete on my keyboard to get rid of them. And I'll listen back again. All right, joining me now is Todd Howard, producer for the audio music segment. Thanks. Okay, so now we have a much cleaner start, and I'll continue listening from here. Thanks for joining me today, Todd.
Sure, Garrick. Thanks for having me.
So I think the question that always comes up whenever anyone hears the word producer, whether you're talking about movies or music, or in this case, video tutorials, is what exactly does a producer do? What's your role in getting the courses created and online?
Well, in the case of a content producer here, we essentially own the project all the way through from its initial approval, where the content manager brings an author and a table of contents and a course name forward, all the way through post-production until the course goes live. So that just means working directly with the author in crafting their material into a well instructionally designed piece of training, coaching them during recording and being with them to take notes for the editors and different things during the recording. And then in post-production, making sure that everything is being, fumbling a little bit here.
Sorry.
Seeing the course go through its paces with the different teams that work on it.
Okay, so there's a fumble I should probably get rid of, since he's sort of doing a second take there. So I'm going to go back and listen a little bit to see where I can make this cut.
The editors and different things during the recording, and then in post-production, making sure that everything is being okay.
Okay, so I think right after he says in post-production here.
And then in post-production, making sure that
so let's find that again.
Then in post-production,
so probably right about there. Again, I'm going to make sure I select both of these regions by holding down Shift and clicking them. And now hit Command T to make the split there. And I think I want to pick it up from right here.
Seeing the course go through its paces with the different teams that work on it.
All right, so again, I'm going to place my playhead right there. Again, Command T. And I can remove these two sections again by Shift clicking them and hitting Delete. So now I actually need to move these two regions back together so there's not this enormous pause here. So I can do this by simply clicking and dragging this marquee out so it selects both of those regions, and I can just click on one of them to drag them over. Now it's just a matter of figuring out if the timing is correct.
For the editors and different things during the recording, and then in post-production, seeing the course go through its paces with the...
Okay, so we're hearing that little bit of a gap there, so I'm going to make sure I close this gap down. Make sure we don't hear that.
For the editors and different things during the recording, and then in post-production, seeing the course go through its paces with...
Okay, it's getting there, but not quite clean enough. I'm going to place my cursor in the lower left-hand corner of this region here. Just drag that out a little bit to give myself a little bit more breathing room. And let's hear how that sounds.
During the recording, and then in post-production, seeing the course go through its paces with the different teams that work on it.
Getting close. I think we caught a little bit of a breath here at the end of this one, so I'm going to select, or shift-click to select both of those again, and extend this out just a little bit. Listen to that.
The recording, and then in post-production.
Yep, see, he's taking a breath there. So I can either try to cut that breath out or try to find the natural end of that breath.
The recording, and then in post-production, seeing the course go through.
Okay, so I think that'll work a little bit better that way. I'll shift-click these again, maybe tighten that up a little bit. Let's bring them back together, see how that sounds.
And then in post-production, seeing the course go through its paces with the different...
Okay, so I think that works a little bit better. Let me just listen to that again.
Take notes for the editors and different things during the recording. And then in post-production, seeing the course go through its paces with the different teams that work on it during post-production, like editors and graphics, sound...
Okay, so that definitely works better for me. And let's continue.
Sound mixing, QA and beta testing, as well as the delivery team that puts it out on the library.
So you really do guide it from the very inception of the course all the way till the point where it comes out online.
That's right. Yep.
Now, let's do that again. Do you have any particularly favorite courses that have come out recently? Okay, so there's a flub on my part. I kind of stumbled up on my words. Now, again, I could make the cuts and just close that. But just by way of example here, there's this point where Todd coughs or clears his throat. Let's do that again. Now, if he had cleared his throat while I was actually speaking, I wouldn't be able to edit both tracks by cutting out that cough. Instead, I would only work with Todd's track by cutting out that cough. So just as an example here, I would make sure that was the only track selected. I'd place my playhead before the throat clearing, hit Command-T. Place it afterwards, hit Command-T again. And we could cut that out of there. That would leave my track up here intact, and you would continue to hear me speak uninterrupted, and that throat clearing would have been cut out. But that does introduce another problem. Let's listen. Let's do that again. So because I cut that out, there's sort of an unnatural silence because we're used to hearing the slight background noises going on in the background there. But that suddenly drops out, and if I just solo up that track, so we're only hearing this track, you'll hear that. Now, there are a couple of different ways you can fix this. You can play around with the volume panning and things like that. Now, one quick way we can do this is by taking advantage of the fact that there's nothing going on here. Todd wasn't speaking, and we have a good sample of that background noise. So what I might want to do in this case is to select this region here, make a split, and then select this region of silence, and then Option drag it over to make a copy. So that fills in that completely silent area by making a copy of that background noise. Now, let's do that again. So you don't hear that obvious dropout where it becomes absolute silence. You still hear some of that background sound. And that's going to sound a lot more natural. I'm going to hit Command-Z a couple times to undo all that. And let's unsolo that track. Because in this case, this throat clearing happened while I was stumbling around for words, so I don't need to do all that complicated editing I just showed you. So I really just need to cut out the part where I was stumbling. It comes out online.
That's right. Yep.
Now, so right before I say the word now, again, I'm going to shift-click to make sure both regions are selected. I'll hit Command-T. And I'll come back to where I actually start speaking properly again. Do you have any particularly... right about there. Again, Command-T. Select the two regions in the middle and delete them. Select and drag this over. And you always want to make sure to listen back to check the flow of the edits. Of course, all the way till the point where it comes out online.
That's right. Yep.
Do you have any particularly favorite courses that have come out recently? Okay, so that works for me. I'll continue on.
Sure. Actually, a lot of courses. I guess I would mention our Foundations of Digital Audio with Matt Mayfield, which is relatively new and just explores the entire situation with digital, analog, and acoustic sound and how that works. Let me say that again.
Okay, here's another part we need to cut out.
Sure, there's always great titles.
Okay, so this is where he starts his answer again. So again, I'm going to place my playhead right before that, Command-T, and I'll go back to right after I ask the question, which is right here, that have come out recently. And I think I'll try to catch us before his inhalation there so we don't hear a cut-off breath. Again, Shift-click to select, Command-T. We can get rid of the two regions here where the first take was, and then select these other two regions and drag them back over. And we'll hear how that sounds. Do you have any particularly favorite courses that have come out recently?
Sure, there's always great titles coming out. I'm particularly excited about Foundations of Digital Audio with
that works for me, and we'll continue.
With Matt Mayfield, as well as our Music Theory for Songwriters series, The Foundations and Harmony with Julian Villard. Those are great for digging inside of how music works and what makes chord progressions actually tick.
Right.
And something maybe very pertinent to this interview is a podcasting business and law course by Rich Stim. Really make sure you know how to stay out of trouble while, putting podcasts together.
Yeah. So from a legal standpoint, like what content you can include, things like that?
Exactly. How to secure music licenses, how to make sure that you're not doing something that's offensive to anyone, all those sorts of things.
So that would probably be a good follow-up course to this one that we're working on right now.
I think it would be a perfect choice.
Very appropriate. So now, you're a musician yourself, right?
I am. Yep.
And I imagine that informs the way you handle the audio recording courses.
Yeah, I mean, it to some degree makes me certainly knowledgeable, if not an expert on certain topics that we're working with. So I become a good collaborator for the author, but also just kind of creates that shared language of music and of performing and of recording that just helps to build rapport.
So you can sort of speak on the same level as the author working on the course.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Well, listen, I'm going to let you get back to work producing courses, including this one, I guess.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So thanks for stopping by.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Okay, so that is the end. I think it's actually pretty good. Now, since these two regions are still selected, I'm just going to shorten them up a little bit, again, by putting my cursor in the lower right-hand corner, because that is the end of the segment right about there. Just listen to that.
Yeah.
So thanks for stopping by.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Okay, so I think that's all I need to do at this point. I've definitely cleaned up the most obvious stumbles on both tracks, and the interview is going to sound a lot more cohesive now. And of course, I could continue working on this if I wanted to tighten it up even more by chopping up the regions some more and moving them closer together. Or conversely, I could allow them more space by moving some of our words and phrases further apart. I could also play around with the levels of the individual tracks and work on making our voices more even with each other, but I'll talk about how to do that when we get to the section on mixing. For now, I think this is okay. So next, we're going to take a look at how to insert additional content into the project to continue building out and assembling the podcast.